For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Lumkile Nkomfe. Joining me is author Tendayi Sithole, here to discuss his latest book, Black X, Liberatory Thought in Azania. Your book addresses the country's colonial past and the dehumanization of black people. Can you talk about the significance of the letter X in your book's title?
The letter X, it is a sign which marks that which is present, that which is absent, and it has many meanings. And I've made it to be an open-ended sign, but specifically, if one thinks about the name of the country, which is Azania, it is the name that is regarded as being absent, but it is there. Those who've been calling hard for this name, for example, the likes of Robert Sobukwe and the founding members of the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania, they've been calling for this name, which influenced even the Black consciousness movement of Steve Biko and many others. And also, it relates to something that is important in this country, that the issue of anti-black racism, we regard it as, no, it is not there because 1994 changed everything and we are in non-racialism. But there are still acts of dehumanization that still continue, and even the presence of the remnants of colonialism, they are still here with us. That is why it cannot be something of the past.
And can you discuss the significance and implications of the idea to rename South Africa to Azania?
The implications, of course, are scary. Indeed, the name can change. The name should change. Many countries have changed their names. But the thing that should not happen, which for me is scary, is that we should not rename this country while the material and the structural issues have not changed. For example, the question of anti-black racism, land dispossession, and then exploitation of labor and dehumanization writ large. Because if we can have the name Azania while things have not changed, it is going to be an insult, as it has happened in many post-colonial situations. And I believe the name Azania is something that must push us. I'm glad that in 1994 that this country was not renamed Azania, so that we know that in its meaning that it means the land of the free, and then those who are black, right, that they are dispossessed of their land, their humanity and their labor. So those things, they have to be repaired and restored first before we can have this name. So the implications are that which call for a high level of political responsibility, which must be undertaken. And this is something that I would say is necessary and it is imperative. We need some bold political imagination. And we're thankful that there were waves of transformation in the early 90s. Those debates about African Renaissance, they did their task, but it was only in 2011 when the discourse on decolonization started. Before, fees must fall and roads must fall, which the latter which played a very important part in making sure that the political imagination was put into practice, and we saw systemic changes, and we need more.
How tenable is it to imagine and reconfigure Azania in a multicultural society? And is it necessary for the proposals mentioned in the book to align with varying public sensibilities?
Of course, as we know, South Africa is a polity, which means a politically organized community. That's what the word polity means. That it has to be a polity that is proper, which reflects the true nature of this country. For instance, it cannot be that you're having the black majority and then you have whites, you have other races. They cannot speak even one indigenous language. In this country, if you talk about racism, you are going to be labeled as being obsessed with race, taking the country backward, and not aligning yourself to the spirit of the Constitution. But the Constitution which does not reflect the reality of this country. We know very well that South Africa doesn't love black people. we must start there. Under the black government, we've seen black people like being killed without any form of accounting. We see how the judicial system works. We see how even the structural violence, where the mass death of black people in the everyday life. Look at even cases like Estimeni, Marikana. We can go on and on and on. That we cannot even call this country multicultural at all. In the sense that if it was multicultural, there was supposed to be coexistence. But that does not exist. The apartheid and the colonial spatial planning, it is still in place. The economic infrastructure, it is still in place. Yes, you might have some blacks in the boardrooms, but that does not mean fundamental change. I believe that there has to be a whole reconfiguration of everything. If we are going to have systematic change, it has to be fundamental change, not cosmetic change that, oh, we have black management or we have blacks who are living in the suburbs. We know that these very same blacks, they are indebted middle class. We need to understand what is racism. The manner in which your life in general gets eliminated, prohibited by the very idea of the structures that do exist. Like, the lifespan of black people is not the same. The salaries are not the same. There needs to be the challenge to this liberal consensus, which says to us, oh, we are all free. Even now, there is the whole frenzy of 30 years of democracy, which I'm finding very, very insulting, like to the memory of those who wanted a South Africa that is truly liberated. We are yet to have that outside the confines of the liberal consensus, which tells us, let's forget the past, let's focus on the present and the future. But how do we do that while we still have the reality that is still hitting us in a way that is very, very insulting?
In the book, you criticize ideologies such as liberalism and Marxism for their inability to grasp the extent of black suffering and dispossession. Why are these specific ideologies unable to do so?
Liberalism and Marxism, specifically because they don't want to talk about the question of anti-black racism. It is clear, Marxists, they will tell you clearly that no, it's not about race, it's about class. Or class trumps over race. Or no, race, it is there, but it's not the over-determining factor. So you see that in the Marxist underpinning, which South Africa has a rich and a long history of, we know, with the Communist Party of South Africa, CPSA 1921, in the mine strike that happened, it said white workers unite, and there was a call for workers of the world unite, but they changed it to suit their own condition. And that tradition of Marxism, it went on, and then the party changed into the South African Communist Party. Then even in their literature, look at how the issue of race was just minimized. And you come also to 2005, where we saw the upsurge of social movements, most which became very Marxist in leaning, and they were addressing real material conditions. But the issue of having to center the question of race has been something minimal. But you'll understand that because of there was no grammar of black people in those movements. They must speak the language of their masters or the narrative of their masters who are white. Even the idea of black Marxism, it is only existing now, and it is even finding its vocal expression after Fees Must Fall. People, after having encountered the works of Cedric Robinson, who did a very refined critique of Marxism from the black point of view. People like even Aikwe Ama, when he did a very, very, very beautiful piece in a pamphlet called Présence Africaine in 1985, a piece which you cannot even find in the archives now. Very, very, very scarce to find, but it is there in the book. With liberalism, we have to go to Steve Biko. Even before him, people like Stokely Kamikael, Aimé Césaire, they've critiqued white liberalism. What white liberalism does, that they act on behalf of black people. They speak on behalf of black people. We are being told, even in the post-1994, because of this is what has triumphed as the ruling ideological framework. And we have to look at, before 1994, we have to look at the work that has been done by the likes of the South African Institute of Race Relations. right? The colloquiums that they did, the paucity of literature that they've produced on how this country should become. And you are finding that clear expression in the current constitution that we are having in this country, right? And the very same constitution which we need to critique. Why are we not thinking about the 1993 constitution, which was clear on the question of reparations? And we know that liberalism, in short, it says the individual is prior to society, it's about meritocracy and stuff. And the ruling party bought into that because it's a very seductive and dazzling ideology. You can easily identify with it because it speaks to things that you believe in. But we know how liberalism has nothing to do with the question of anti-black racism. That is why, like, if you look at even the founding principles of black consciousness, because the likes of Steve Biko, they believed in liberalism before they changed. What happened after that? When they saw what liberals did to them, they did black consciousness. And people like Alan Paton, they were even against black people thinking for themselves. So we know how paternalistic liberalism is, that you'll not be allowed as a black person to speak from the black point of view. So this is a kind of critique that I'm fashioning here. And even our constitution, with its, because we know that the regime that people are celebrating today, it is called liberal constitutional democracy. 1994, that's what we have thrived. It's a freedom for all. And then even the Freedom Charter, it is based on those values.
Can you discuss the significance of land dispossession in this country and its existential connection to black life? What type of response does the book offer to the often debated land question, including in an increasingly urbanized society?
I wouldn't dichotomize the geographical habitation in terms of urban and rural, because, like, we know that the questions of land dispossession, they are very, 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 very serious, and we should look into the past, the kind of legislations that were imposed. But then the thing that I'm bringing up in the book, like the question of land, I would regard it as a catastrophe, right? It's a catastrophe, the existential crisis par excellence, in a sense that I'm bringing the question of being land in terms of black life. By this I mean, here is the life that has been dispossessed of land, and this does not start in 1913. I think we need to abandon that. The question of land must start from 1652. We must start there, and this date is very significant in order to understand the wars and the violations and the legislations that came to dispossess the issue of land, and how even the question of black urbanization cannot be delinked from the destruction of the black family unit in the rural areas. We know that there were black people who were owning land, who did the businesses, but how those things, they were destroyed, and then their bodies, they were turned into labor, right? And let's look at the history of mining. So when I'm saying land, it's not farms. When I'm saying land, I want us to imagine this even to the cosmological level. It's everything. It's a totality of life, and being dispossessed of this, it's a serious violation that no kind of legislation that stands today can understand it. That is why even the constitution that we are having is toothless when it comes to the issue of land, because we have the property clause, which I find ludicrous, to a point where even the debates, things like land without expropriation, I'm finding them scratching the surface. We need a commission of inquiry, which I will call the Jan van Riebeck Commission of Inquiry. And this will need serious jurists, people who are going to understand law at the fundamental level.
How pertinent is the issue of race in this book? And why does this topic offer such adversarial responses?
The question of race is everything. It's a don't-go area. There's a fear of having to engage the question of racism. But the significance in this book, in terms of racism, is that people have been talking about racism in general terms. So in this country, even the racist perpetrators, they are now victims of racism. We know the late FW did claimed to be the victim of racism, and bodies and formations like your South African Human Rights Commission, they don't even understand what racism is. And we see how powerful the liberal consensus is doing all that is in its might to destroy anything that has to do with the question of race, because it's not an invention, it's a reality that we are in. And what we have to confront. And I don't believe in this scam of, let's work together to emulate racism. No. What I'm proposing is, it's very simple. We have to redefine racism. I'm talking about anti-black racism. I want to be specific. So to dislodge this liberal consensus, which is, we are all affected, let's find solutions. We don't need solutions. We need to understand anti-black racism as a specific form of racism. And for there to be the end of racism, we don't need white people to come and assist black people or support them. No, they must dislodge it. I'm very specific in terms of the infrastructure of racism, because we know that white people are supported by institutions. In this country, there are no institutions that support black people. Black people need to have the power to repossess the definition and the meaning of racism. And when I'm saying even the issue of black pain, I'm not meaning it in this performative sense. Black pain, no. This is something serious. We go to the townships. Every weekend, it's funerals. We have to question that. We go to hospitals. The mortality rates are so ridiculous. So we need to understand racism in terms of even structural levels.
The book also seems to denounce the current iteration of the Constitution and the rule of law. Is this a fair characterization? And if so, what is the basis of this critique?
I would say maybe my critique is limited. I would say maybe my critique is legit. But let's start with the Constitution. The Constitution of this country does not reflect the reality that we are in. Do you know that the Constitution does not have 3 words? Racism, slavery, and colonialism. Read it from the beginning to the end. You won't find those 3 words. And then it tells us about the injustices of the past. Now, if you look at this construction of the past, it is as if this past starts from 1948. Of course, when you come to the issue of land, it starts from 1913. But this country has a long history of slavery. The critique of the law and the Constitution comes from the very fact that they don't express the black point of view. And these are institutions that are supposed to reflect the matters of the polity. As I said, that the polity means the politically organized community. That does the Roman Dutch law. Of course, you'll have the customary law, but it is that thing of the chiefs, then the rural areas. It is not looked in terms of it having an elevated juridical status. And we know that the power of the judicial infrastructure in this country. And we must know that slavery, colonialism, and apartheid, they were based on law. They were legal systems. So I think that there is a forgetting that is being done, that this anti-black racism was codified into law. Look at the hyper legislations of apartheid. Study only the 20th century in terms of the legislations that were done against black people. So we cannot let the law off the hook, even if there might be issues of juridical transformation, and we see how even the concept law itself, that it needs to be totally refigured so that it can speak to the reality that we are in. So in terms of the fair characterization, I would say that the fairness comes from having to understand the law from the black point of view. What has the law done to black people? We have townships because of the law. And now, the critique of the law that needs to be done is that we should not regard the law as that which is absolute. Because by this I mean, there is this thing of the law is the law, as if the law was not invented by human beings. So all these systems, they need to be studied anew. We cannot have a just polity if the law is not attended to, because for the polity to exist, it needs to be underpinned by law. But we need to ask, what kind of law do we need? And for this to happen as well, we need a new jurisprudence. And I'm glad that there are people like who are doing beautiful work. People like Joel Mudiri, Ndumiso Zala, Mukhobe Ramose, and many others who are pushing even the critiques of the Constitution. We need that. And I think that will start by not regarding the Constitution as the most progressive in the world. A lot of work has to be done.
And finally, what would you like readers to take away from your book?
I'm not beyond criticism. They need to read the book slowly and carefully. And by this, I'm very serious on this. Like, I didn't write, fried steak kind of a book. Like, I did the oxtail, slow cooking movement. And it's a book that is not there to shock, but it's a reality that we are in. Like the things that I'm saying here, I'm not the first one. I'm building on my predecessors, my contemporaries, and even in other parts of the world, because we need to understand that this is the high time that we need to attend to the stakes that we are in, and these stakes are very high. So this is a book that must be read with fidelity and humility.
That was author Tendayi Sithole discussing his book, Like X, Liberatory Thought in Azania.